So with every other Vault Hunter foaming at the mouth with their laundry list of buffs, we have Harlowe over here, our girl Harlowe just kind of sitting here asking herself, what in God's earth is she doing? To the credit of Harlowe, she has probably two of the best trees in the entire game, so I'm not going to sit here and act like this is, I'm going to cry, there's no other way Harlowe could do damage in the game, alright? Harlowe has a lot of damage capabilities and a lot of damage potential in the game, but Blue Tree, I think, is just fundamentally flawed. Now, this is coming from somebody that day one on Borderlands 4's release, I played Blue Tree Harlowe from level 1 all the way till level 50 and did not touch anything else. It is the only Harlowe tree I touched. But now when I try to make it endgame viable with all the endgame tools and stuff actually at our disposal, kind of makes me wonder what they were thinking. Because sure, it does a little bit more slam damage and you can kind of mob with it depending on what you're doing. But the amount of time it takes for me to kill a group of enemies from making them bounce up and down rapidly, like it's Riley Reid riding on some big black dude's it really makes you think why this tree even exists to begin with. Suspend people and make things not hit you. And it kind of doesn't even do a great job at doing that because the other two trees do a great job of just killing things so they don't hit you to begin with. So it leads me to question the design choice with it, and I'm not gonna make this video just shitting on whoever designed this tree because you know, Toxic Termex has to give a little bit of input here. How would I fix this? How would I make this tree actually worth a damn moving forward? Because we're gonna have to deal with this tree, and it feels like one of the first times a whole skill tree kind of feels useless. Flack kind of ran into this issue with Purple Tree, so I didn't think something like this would ever happen again. In my humbled Termex opinion, I think the first thing that we really need to do is address the fact that it cannot go onto mini bosses, it cannot go onto major bosses, and it can't even go onto some vile enemies. And why is this important? Well, vile enemies, bosses, mini bosses, these are going to be your tankiest enemies. These are the enemies where your action skill matters the most, but for Blue Tree Harlowe, it's where your action skill matters the least. Yes, you can get a bunch of cooldown abilities with your action skill and just constantly re-trigger the big chunk of damage when you use it on a target that is too tanky to be encapsulated to begin with. Kind of like Maya from Borderlands 2. When you're fighting something, you kind of just phase lock the air, and it's more of a stat stick than it is a actual ability, and that is pretty much the same issue going into this game. But how do we remedy this? Well, first of all, at least mini bosses. At the very bare minimum, not huge big bosses, obviously, like, you know, Soul and all those people. We don't need to phase lock all of them. But going into phase locking bosses, I'm going to call it phase lock, okay? Phase locking bosses that are on the drill sites, phase locking basically anything that is a little bit bigger than you makes absolute sense. Not people like Timekeeper or Soul or the bigger people in the game, just things that are of decent size to make you think, oh wow, okay, I could lift him up. Now, with the slam build you're seeing on screen, this is the best I've gotten it, and all you really do is you put on a certain class mod that every time you slam, it sends out just projectiles everywhere, and the more you slam, the more damage the slam is going to do, and the bigger the radius is, and you get to the point where it looks pretty mesmerizing, and a huge chunk of AoE. But where this falls flat with bossing is since you can't grab the boss and do this to them, and re-trigger it and do more damage over and over again, it leaves the tree to be less desired because every other Harlowe tree deals boss damage, and the end game of Borderlands is boss damage, and the green tree and the red tree do bossing and ad clear just as good, or if not better, than Blue Tree's whole gimmick, which is AoE ad clear. So, when you have a skill tree that underperforms in every way possible and is inconvenient compared to every other form of dealing damage, it just makes the skill tree, in a very respectable way of saying, completely useless and just there to be there. Now, I don't think only changing this will be the, you know, see all, fix all, but I do think it'll be a good step in the right direction, or at least maybe alter one of the augments. Now, the augments are a very weird thing with Harlow's Blue Tree because some of them are cool, some of them do more slam damage, some of them have more radiation, but I think when you take an augment or a capstone and fix it to the point where when you phase lock an enemy or phase lock an enemy that cannot be phase locked, they take increased damage for a set duration, that enemy takes more damage from status effects, that enemy gets guaranteed crits, that enemy takes damage over time, some sort of debuff on the bigger enemies to where if you're using Blue Tree Harlowe, you don't feel just weighed down and useless when it comes to killing bosses with it, and you have a new avenue for doing damage with your builds. Because right now the slamming is pretty fun, you know, directing people where to go and where to slam them, the cryo novas. If you want to do that build, I have a build on my channel and that works fine. So if you love Blue Tree and you want to try it, that build on my channel is pretty much the way to go right now. now. But if you want to do anything for bossing, I can't confidently say there's much you can do unless you want to use a glitch or some sort of thing unrelated to Blue Tree Harlowe, and you're just kind of using Blue Tree as a shell to kind of slide by and say, oh yeah, I'm using Blue Tree, but you're not really using Blue Tree. Because if we look into Blue Tree Harlowe, we have some nice things here. Like we have Strange Attractor, which is ricocheting, but we have Ricochet in Green Tree, and we have Ricochet from just Green Tree existing. We have the Stasis Slamming with the action skill cooldown rate and action skill duration rate, but we already have multiple of that in Green Tree. Especially when we freeze an enemy in Green Tree, we could just keep our action skill up as long as possible. And we have a Harlowe class mod where if we shoot enemies, we get our action skill back quick. So these two augments kind of don't really have much value. Another augment is when enemies are entangled, they take bonus radiation damage, which is nice. It restores action skill duration when we deal radiation gun damage, which is also nice because it keeps our bubble up. This probably is one of her best augments in Blue Tree. But when we go over here, the storage damage that stores itself and then expels, there's a cap to it. If you hover an ad next to a boss and you want to pump damage into that ad and then slam it into the boss, you really can't because that stored damage has a maximum amount, and it just feels like a nerfed version of neutron capture, which has infinitely better damage scaling possibilities that it kind of makes Blue Tree seem more of a joke. And then finally, inertia, which is kind of inspired from Borderlands 2 Maya, where when an enemy is killed, it automatically seeks out another enemy and keeps a duration active. This is also good. This could play well into any slam build. But going to the capstones, you could place additional enemies at the cost of action skill duration. This kind of just seems like a nuance. It kind of seems like it's there to be there. We have multiple ways to chain and tangle. We literally have an augment to chain the stasis itself. Not really seeing the point of that capstone. Slamming with the singularity and cryo explosion. This isn't too bad. I would like to maybe see this where the singularity being a little bit bigger for more ad clear potential, or perhaps with the cryo explosion, that cryo explosion could do more damage. It does scale pretty well, and it does do a lot of good damage if you build for it properly, because that scales off of elemental damage, it scales off of all that kind of stuff, plus your cryo specific skill. So the synergy with that is good when you are comparing it to the build. Cold storage having a cap just kind of ruins the whole interaction. And then the final capstone is ground state, which I personally think has some of the most potential out of this whole build, because if you look into inertia will just find somebody else and keep the duration going, and when you get ground state, you can no longer control where you slam your stasis enemy. So in conjunction with this over here, that means when that enemy is in stasis, you could finish them off, and since you can't move them, you can't get another target, it will automatically seek that target and keep the slam damage that is stored. Because with the way ground state works is every time you slam, every subsequent slam increases the radius by 30% and the damage by 30%, which in theory is great. And I'm using it for this video because every time we freeze somebody, our action skill duration is frozen, and when we get a kill, we gain duration back, and we gain duration for just having an enemy entangled, which is easy to do because that AoE gets bigger and bigger, entangling everything into the area. So my issue with this is when we're using it, you cannot use it on bosses. If you could like change this capstone to be allowed on bosses and you just keep spamming your action skill on the boss and it keeps stacking and stacking damage, it would solve a lot of bossing issues with this tree. Or just maybe make one of these capstones you're able to phase lock bosses but at 50% the normal cooldown, or something related to bossing, because the AoE is there, but the AoE could also be improved in many different ways, but it needs to have something in the tree that sets it apart, because we have AoE bossing. That's Red Tree. We have insane fire rate, gun damage, radiation damage, nuking potential, single target nuking in this tree. You want AoE, ad clear, survivability, infinite ricochets, you have Green Tree. You have infinite reload speed, overshield, survivability. You're not going to die with Green Tree Harlowe when you play it correctly, because as long as you're shooting somebody, you have max overshield. In Red Tree, it's kind of hard to die when everything in the vicinity is dead. So Blue Tree, once again, has nothing going for it other than the little bit of cryo damage, the amount of action skill uptime you could have, which people are just using to bolster the other trees, finding a class mod with control group, or finding any sort of class mod that boosts action skill duration and cooldown so they can use it into the other trees. So right now, at least in my humbled Harlowe opinion, I only have 230 hours, so I know my opinion isn't fact, but in everything I've tried, this tree just needs a massive redesign and or overhaul in order for this tree to be desirable to the player base. Great tree, great concept, great potential, but they definitely need to look into the things I listed in today's video. And hey, if you're a Harlowe main, I might be wrong. You guys may have found some crazy interaction, or if you share my same sentiment, let me know in the comments down below. You guys have a terrific day, stay safe, and I'll see you all later.